Welcome to Birdsong. I'm your host, Caillou Kiora, and in this episode we have Paisley Heart Satchel joining us. Paisley combines his obsession between spirituality, artistic expression, nature, ritual, entrepreneurship, and shamanic practice, while walking boldly between these worlds, embodying the hybrid archetypes of the wild businessman and the lifestyle artist. He is the founder of the Shamanic Rite of Passage event, which is called The Funeral, and he's the host of a panel-style podcast titled Curious Conversations, while previously offering his unique gifts through his businesses, which involve the digital marketing agency, DigiLove, and the independent record label, Fight Music. Paisley has an unorthodox style, which has often been challenging for his clients and for professionals in the industry, and pushing against these paradigms has become a strong and recognizable brand that he is proud of, and you will probably get a sense of that through our conversation. He's a fascinating human who isn't afraid to explore the taboo and be quite open along the journey. Let's get straight into it. I trust you will find value in this dialogue to carry with you on your own path forward. Where does the name Paisley Heart come from?
Have you ever heard of the festival called New Kind?
I think I have, in Tasmania. Is that correct?
Yeah.
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 Okay.
So the idea when it was first birthed, it's sort of like, if a new civilization was going to start, how would you want to run it? And two friends of mine started it. I went down, and there's this whole like character building at the start. You go through these different rites of passage because there's these 6 different facilitators. I can't remember what they are, but there's like healer, like permaculturist, mechanic, architecture, all these different, I can't remember what the facilitators were, but there was something like that, artist. And you rename yourself in this new society. And that's just what came to me, Paisley Heart. And for me, especially at that time in my life, I wore bandanas a lot, not only just like on my head, but on certain clothes, like I would patch them on. And I just loved the Paisley design. And for me, especially in that era of my life, I was quite like anarchist. Like I loved, and you know, stereotypically you would see that, like I like the stereotypical version of an anarchist, the ones that riot on the street, destroy the shit, you know, fuck the system.
With the bandana on?
They with the bandanas over their face, blah. But then I also liked how the name Paisley itself was quite feminine and soft, and you also see it on all these different traditional materials, these softer looking Paisley. So I liked the duality of it being both like rough and anarchist, masculine, destroy, but also like soft and beautiful and feminine. And then I just a heart afterwards, because that's just what it felt like. I have a Paisley heart.
Oh, that's beautiful.
That's where it came from. Yeah.
Oh, that's lovely. Well, look, brother, formally, I just want to say thanks for taking the time out of your morning and having this conversation with me, coming on the show. It's nice to swap roles after you invited me on your show, Curious Conversations.
It is. Yeah.
Where we had that panel of guests, which is what you've been doing on Curious Conversations, having a panel of guests, which is a nice way, a unique way of presenting podcast conversations to the world, because as far as I'm aware, there are not that many people, if anyone, that's doing it. I haven't come across anyone. You're certainly the first.
Yeah, it's really cool doing it. There's definitely areas I can see myself being limited, but I just like perspective. For instance, like I love the messages that I get from, like, I did one on men's work recently, and there's 3 different men, and just their perspectives were so different. And as you know beforehand, I encourage everyone to either answer off the back of someone else's question or to challenge someone else's answer. So it was really beautiful to get these 3 different perspectives. And because the majority of my audience is male, I got a lot of messages saying, like, thank you for actually these different perspectives, because I didn't agree with blah, but I really agreed with this person. So that's what I really want, is just to get different perspectives from different people to understand that we all do see things differently, but also a lot of us have common threads. Plus, because of COVID, and not just because of COVID, but definitely during COVID, a lot of podcasts popped up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's like, if I interview someone, everyone's heard this person be interviewed 6 times by the time I get to their minimum, because there are just podcasts everywhere. But what's it like if I have that person with this person and another person? So just giving a different angle of like, yeah, but you haven't heard Bill Smith with John Doe and Linda Stevenson, like,
Classic names.
so the classic names. Yeah. That was my, I guess, marketing angle of just trying to figure out how to actually get people to check me out when there's 1,000 amazing podcasts out there to also check.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, as I mentioned to you, I usually get a pretty high charge of energy after I finish up with these conversations. And I think it's a mixture of being able to spend a little bit of time with people that I find inspiring or interesting or considered to be mentors or teachers or allies in one way or another. And I think it might also have something to do with staring into a computer screen for an uninterrupted amount of time and having these bright lights glaring in my face. But what's interesting about the podcast environment, at least to me, is, when we speak or when we say things, it's recorded, evidently, and it can come to represent a static perception of ourselves or a static sentence or an idea or some sort of belief. When, for myself, when I'm asked a question that I haven't been asked before, I might speak some words off the top of my head to answer this particular question, but only later do I have more time to reflect on what it is that I've actually said. And I'm like, is what I said actually true? Do I actually believe that? And, because you can't really take 5 minutes to reflect on an answer during a podcast conversation, because ain't nobody got time for that when they're listening to a podcast. And like you said, with so many podcasts out there, you've got to be sharp. You've got to be on your answers just straight away, off the cuff. And there's a reason that I'm bringing this up, because to me, this ties into this idea of this archetypal energy, which is shapeshifting, which we've talked about before. And you, my friend, are a classic shapeshifter. It's being able to say or do things or embody a certain energy or, ride the edges of the taboo while not necessarily being attached to any of these things. And I think there's strong medicine there in recognizing that, we can all have the ability to shapeshift in one way or another. And, it's like when we explore these ideas and say things without this background thrum of fear or the white noise of not wanting to, it's like this white noise keeping us contained and not wanting to step outside of our comfort zone. I think there's medicine in being able to come to see that within ourselves and see that within others. And, it's getting into a bit of a preamble here, but I am getting to something. And it's in a recent post, I said something to the effect of, words are sacred. The words that we use are sacred. They hold weight. They hold meaning. We can be very, very precise with the words that we want to use to convey a very particular message. And there's an importance in being mindful of our speech, especially because I tend to say that it has a more than human resonance. Yeah, like language isn't an exclusively human possession. It can affect, the entire animate world around us. And that's something I've talked about before, and that's a completely different conversation. But, it's good to say things sometimes to see what emerges, to stir the collective pot. And in this post, I said something to the effect of, to howl at the full moon of social media wearing the fox pelt and the coyote headdress. It's the classic shapeshifter. It's the classic trickster. And, I think, with all of that kind of preamble of shapeshifting, I love to start this show by asking my guests what their relationship is to honoring the sacred. So as a shapeshifter yourself and a weaver of archetypes and stepping into so many different realms and worlds of being and all these different experiences that you have, what does it mean for you to honor the sacred?
The first one that comes to mind right now is I'm fascinated, very, very, very fascinated with other, like everyone else. Whether it's people I know, whether it's people I see on the street, whether it's people I see on TV, whatever it is. And whenever I see something sacred about someone else, I turn the mirror back to me and go, all right, your turn. You know, like whatever you revere in them, it's time to make that yourself, to go out and make that a sacred practice of my own in the world, to embody it. That's a big part of anything, you know, in life. As soon as I see something that's like, oh, like that, I see God, I see spirit, I see anything that I want to revere. Yeah, and it doesn't happen immediately, but it's just that the job is to slowly turn the mirror around back on myself, and then like, oh, okay, fuck, I have to do this thing. And that's how I honor the sacred for myself.
Are there any ceremonial or ritualistic practices that you find yourself returning to within daily life, or perhaps when it comes to the context of engaging or entering what might be ceremonial or ritualistic or sacred space, that you've found to be of specific value or resonance to your heart and your soul and who you are as a person?
I would say it's so modern, but and it's funny, curious how it feels shameful, but it's the truth, is like social media, man. Like, and the ability, it doesn't always have to be social media, but like I write out everything. So whatever it is that I'm fascinated with and that I want to ritualize in some sort of way, is I'll write about it and I'll use those words as a manifestation tool. And then because I have a decent size social media following on Instagram, I use my artistic value of writing and creating some kind of visual product that goes with it, whether it's photo or video. And then I start to weave that alchemy between one another, and I put that reality out to the world, and then everyone else can become my anchor point in a matter of holding the collective truth for me. So whatever I put out, everyone can be like, oh, Paisley is that now. And sometimes I'm not all the way integrated, because obviously beforehand I'm doing my own work, I'm exploring it in different ways, and I have my own mini rituals within that. But the biggest one that really does anchor and change things for me is like, and now I show up as this thing, this way of being, whatever it is, and then everyone else holds that for me. Well, I go off and I take on the new steps, the next steps, whatever it is, because it's that exploring the taboo. And I know I will take things to the next step because I still have that performative part of myself. Like, I still consider myself authentic, but it's like, if I'm here, maybe I can take 2 more steps ahead of where I really am and show up on social media in this way.
Yeah, totally.
I'm fascinated by this answer myself.
Yeah, well, there's definitely parallel there with my somewhat of a ramble, preamble, when it comes to just speaking things and allowing things to emerge, because who knows what's deep down bubbling within the well springs of our being that wants to allow itself to be known to ourselves and to the world. And it's like these things emerge and then we can track them and trail them in real time. And it's like, oh, how interesting that this thing is wanting to be expressed through me, whether or not I actually identify with that particular thing. Like I don't have to. I can be completely unattached and still express and embody whatever this thing is that I'm exploring. And this is one of the things that I love about you. And you, what was the quote on your website? It was something to do with living by the religion of, what was it? Infinite curiosity and no taboo. Living, is that correct? Yeah, something like that. Living by the religion of infinite curiosity or no taboo. And I love how you are, you know, it's so striking about you. It's your willingness to show up into the world and, you know, kind of explore these boundaries. You're a real boundary pusher when it comes to the potential for radical self-expression and self-exploration. So, you know, I kind of wanted to get into this later, but since we're here on the topic, we may as well just flow into it. I would love to hear your ideas on and your perspectives here about how you speak to this notion of self-expression and radical creativity and self-exploration and the intersection of this place with social media, because, you know, it's so interesting that you used or you spoke to social media in regards to a ceremonial or a ritualistic practice of honoring the sacred, because there's such a dichotomy with people that are like, social media is not sacred. Yeah, that's the boundaries. And I've come across this so often. It's like I post pictures or articles or whatever explaining ceremonial processes or showing a picture of a deceased bird, yeah, which has come into my possession. And I've had the real honor of crafting it into a beautiful sacred creation. And I have got a reasonable amount of flack for that in the past, saying that you're making it profane by the very act of posting it on social media. And that is not where I stand. I'm all about planting seeds of the sacred into social media. So I would love to hear you riff on this.
Yeah. Like I was saying just before I started that share about it being social media, there's a bit of me like, you know, the part of me that wants to come across sacred and shamanic and blah, that is a part of my brand, is like, and a part of who I am is like, don't say that. That's not cool to say your sacred is social media, but it's just true, because I do lots of different rituals and meditations and prayer and honoring, but it's the most consistent place on the way that I do it is on social media. The different ways that I do movement and connect with nature and meditate and whatever the ceremony is that I create, that is always different for me. I go through phases, but I know the one place that I consistently show up is on social media. And it's fascinating around this like shapeshifter and this part of me that wants to explore the taboo with infinite curiosity is a part of entertainment for me as well, with my audience. And it's fascinating that we're going to continue talking about this, because last night I chose to apply for Big Brother, and this was my whole angle with my application. Why do we want you on? And I was like, because there's pretty much nothing I won't do in the honor of sacredness and to explore what it is to be human. And that is entertaining to itself. And because I've explored so much, that there's a lot that you won't be able to throw me into that I won't go and do. And yeah, so it's like my spirituality for myself has become a source of entertainment, which obviously plays at its own, can be polarizing in its own essence. But to me, overall, I think where the wanting to explore the taboo is this: whatever society says is wrong, I want to know why. Because I guess it started off in my youth around like sex was a taboo. And, you know, as a kid, I'm so curious about all things sex. And obviously I only had a certain perception of sex. But then like, as I get older, like, you're not allowed to drink. It's like, why when I drink do I have so much fun? And society says I can't do that. And then drugs, like, why does everyone say that's wrong? But I'm having so much fun. And it's like, there's so much out here that everyone says is wrong, but I do it and it feels so right. And it's become a kink for me. Like, I get turned on by doing taboo things. And this doesn't have to mean I'm erect, but sometimes I am. But just meaning like I feel more alive because it gives me that my favorite feeling to have in the world is to be nervous and excited at the same time, such as, you know, when you're about to hook up with someone, or you're about to facilitate something, or you're about to perform, or you're about to tell someone something you never told someone before. Like, there's this precipice of the edge that I'm sitting on. I'm like, fuck, like, I am so nervous. And I've never understood people being like, oh, I hate being nervous. I'm like, I'm nervous. Like, thank fuck, because if I'm not, a lot of things feel mundane in life. And I just, like, my biggest fear in life is this, the mundane, like things that don't make me feel. So that's where the pursuit has come from. And then this might be a bit of a tangent, but social media, it's this journey which I'm very curious about, because I'm on a personal development journey. And then a lot of people get a bit, people love it and people hate it around the, like, there's so much like I, me. But it's like, I am showing a personal development journey. So it is personal to me, and I'm going to share the personal details of what it is. So people really get off on it. And other people are like, this coach guy is so full of himself. Like, because a lot of people just show up and they give like these fancy quotes that encompasses everyone else, or they talk directly to their audience. But to me, I'm like, no, this is my journey. And if this correlates with you, if you feel fascinated by these things where I say if that's what you want in your life, then you just hit me up. So showing people this journey, it's the, like you said, the giving the seed, giving the permission. So when I go off and explore whatever it is, whether it's like open relating, some kind of shamanic practice, whether it's intimacy with men, whether it's exploring with different drugs, whatever it is, that people can go, oh, like, this is okay. Nothing bad is happening to him. He seems to have it together. Or even when he doesn't have it together, he can show up and somehow both not have it all together and have it together at the same time. So this is why I like showing up in all states and just going like, this is what I believe it's like to be human when you are willing to be different, or to show up in all areas of life, and even look at the areas that you didn't even know exist previously.
Yeah, that's great. I mentioned to you in our conversation, I think, when I brought up what the medicine path means to me, and while it's multi-dimensional, multifaceted, one of the things that I speak to often is that with the right perception, there's medicine to be found in all. And the same is certainly true for social media. It's technology and social media is not exempt from that. I think with the right perception and our relationship to it, there is medicine to be found in many, many different ways. And there's also a certain level of risk as well. And you would know this more than anyone when it comes to showing up on social media. And you know, it's within sharing your truth in a way that is exploring the taboo topics, and it's quite likely to trigger a lot of people. And, you know, my mind goes to, you know, whether you love them or hate them, like people like Alex Jones or David Icke or Ben Shapiro or Jordan Peterson. These are kind of like very kind of polarizing figures in the collective. But they're speaking their truth, and it's easy to criticize them from behind a screen. And I'm sure a lot of people, like if you were to drop a person, an individual person, into a room with any of these polarizing figures, and you were forced to work with them to try and escape from this room together, you would probably be approaching them in a completely different way. You don't have that kind of very artificial kind of distancing between someone. So it's so easy for people to throw their hate speech or whatever it is. But I guess the point that I'm making is, imagine the potential density that comes from the people projecting their hatred or their opinions, their unconscious projections, or just, from another lens, they're straight up calling you out on your legitimate shadow side that you haven't become aware of. Imagine all the stuff that comes with that from being such a figure in the public eye. And it's something that I've certainly had to come to terms with myself and learn how to navigate that with, as I continue to show up and share my truth and put my creations out into the world and let myself be seen. So, what are your thoughts when it comes to this particular journey of everything that I've just talked about?
Yeah, it's fascinating. So there was a decent period of my social media career where I liked being triggering. Like, I got off on the polarizing position because it just creates engagement and it grows quickly. But it's that duality of like, lots of people hate you, lots of people love you. But I just didn't find it so healthy. And I'm still torn. I'm like, should I go back to that? Because you do grow so much more quicker. But just the ethics around like triggering people. And it's just the truth, but it's that like, I believe it's like to be confident to the point of delusion where like, but I feel like I've done so much shadow work that I can see the duality in everything that I do now. To an extent, obviously, I'm not the all-seeing, but like I understand more now when I say something that the other side is true. And this is the fascinating thing about social media, especially if you're writing or you're doing a video. It's hard to give. Like, I know what the other side of what I've just said is, but I just don't have. I need a book to tell you both sides,
Totally.
So
Instead of just a short comment, it's going to turn into an entire paragraph if we were to contextualize it within, the bounds of everything.
So when people comment this, like, they're like, you should be thinking about this other side. I'm like, I know. So it's hard to actually trigger me and make me upset and to try and call me out. It's rare that someone calls me out in a way that I go, oh, fuck, I did not think of that. But it's like, yes, I know, but I just didn't get a chance. That's why I love podcasts. So if I watch, for instance, like all those names that you've just given me, I had checked out all their stuff and I'd sort of seen them in long form before, apart from Ben Shapiro, that's his name, yeah? I had seen some snippets and I was like, oh my God, like, this man needs a fucking hug. Like, and like, I just thought he was just, I thought I was projecting on him. I was like, this guy is a piece of shit. Like, I do not like him. And then I was at a friend's house who really liked him and he was trying to get me into him. I was like, no, turn this fucking scumbag off. He is so damaging. And then I watched, he put on, maybe it was like, it must have been like a Joe Rogan podcast or something like that with him. I listened and I don't agree with everything he says, but I was like, like, I get where he's coming from. I understand his conditioning. I understand his perspective. I understand the way that he was raised, and he seems like a really nice guy. He I just seen these small doses of him where his share is polarizing. So, but in this long form interview, now I understand because he has a chance to go, yeah, I understand the other side, but this is just my position. This is why, and this is how. So I think to be polarizing, especially in the social media world, it really does work. But I want to continue to work on, does this have to be the only way? Like, to grow quickly, do you have to be polarizing? I think no, but I'm definitely growing at a slower rate with my audience because I'm not as polarizing as I used to be.
That's so interesting. I guess with that polarization, you're getting starkly different perspectives offered to you, which it would allow yourself or any person who was in that position to be able to take a bird's eye view, or just to have a look at different angles, so that we gain a deeper or a more expansive sense of personal reflection, and where we kind of sit within all of these views that we may not have previously been aware of. And I think
it's
that
it's the stronger emotion. Like if you're polarizing, you either really fucking love it or you really hate it, and there's emotion, and emotion creates effect. So either everyone's telling everyone how much they hate you or how much they love you. There's not really much indifference. So it's this free organic marketing. So like, just for instance, now, like anyone that's listening to this that hadn't heard about Ben Shapiro, like I just shared how much I disliked him just then, and that is really great marketing for him. People will remember that name. Paisley really had some feelings about him. But if it was someone else that doesn't give me lots of feelings, such as, I don't know, like Miley Cyrus, I don't really care what she does. You know, I'm like, yeah, cool. You did this, you did that, you twerked. I don't care. You know, I'm very indifferent. So no one's feeling anything off the back of my share about her. So I think when you're polarizing, you just have a chance. People are going to tell you to, like, people are going to say, look at this fuck shit Paisley said, or look at this amazing shit Paisley said. It's never really like, oh, that, or I don't like that, I'm going to ignore it. So I think that's a big part of the polarizing. It's got great organic marketing.
Yeah, sure. And with the soundbite nature of social media, we're always looking for that, you know, that quick hit, that whatever it is, just so we can market that quick 15 or 30 seconds. It doesn't give us that opportunity that you spoke to, if we are listening to someone within long form conversation, to see the parallels within our journeys. It's like, oh yeah, okay, I see how this particular person grew up, and yeah, I experienced some of those same things, but we're all just kind of offshoots. But there are always parallels within all of our own journeys, if we're willing, or, you know, we got that capacity to open our perception up to that. And that's one thing that I've noticed within hearing you speak, is that we share a few parallels within our own journey. And I think we touched on this in our conversation as well, you know, from being involved in the music scene and all the debauchery that comes with it. You know, it really kind of, for me, and I suspect this is the case for you as well, and I think you've spoken to this just in different language, it ties into this curiosity to try and find a deeper sense of meaning in the world, you know, to the outside world, but also to the inside world as well. And it's almost like a replacement or an unconscious substitute for the lack of rites of passage within our society and culture. And throughout your own self-development and spiritual journey, this is something I wanted to get into in more depth with you, is that you ended up in a place where you started facilitating these burial rituals, which is what a lot of people that have come across you recently know you for. And you termed this ritual the funeral. So I would love to hear you speak a little bit about this, because this is a ritual that has a classic shamanic flavoring to it. You know, it's the modification of our sensory antenna so that we ultimately become more sensitive to our sensory antenna and all of the subtle energies that weave in and out of our human experience. So, you know, what's your relationship to shamanic practice? How did the entire burial ritual come about? Like, what's the intersection and the expansion of these themes?
So, yeah, definitely always been fascinated with pushing my boundaries to a new space. As in, like, and that came earlier with, like, how many drugs can I take and how much can I handle and what states will that push me into? And then eventually, yeah, I realized that that's not good for me. I always knew it wasn't good for me, but then I really realized it wasn't good for me. So I went off and seeked different ways through reading about different religions and practices that they've done within that, different traditions, different people in life doing just different experiments with themselves. So, you know, I'd go out and it's like, okay, cool. What's it like if I live a day blindfolded? What's it going to be like if I live a day without sound? What's it going to be like if I don't eat for the day? All these different ways of being. And there's this person that I had met who was very embedded with their shamanic practices. And one time I was out for dinner and they were there just by chance. And I was talking among a whole group of people and I heard them say something about burying themselves alive. And like, whatever the conversation happening over here, I was like, what did you say? And unpacked with them about the practice, where they got it from. And then they sort of gave me the step-by-step how to do it. Then instantly grabbed my best friend, let's go do it. Went and done it. And it was such a like I'd never heard of the concept, and just to go instantly do it, it was very full on. And like, this was my best friend at the time that I went and done it with. And as soon as I went under, so he taught me about setting the intention, like what do you want to die within you and what do you want to bring to life? What do you want to let go of? What do you want to call in kind of experience? So that was like the death and rebirth. What dies? What do you rebirth into? But I feel like the crux, the most incredible part at first is the like, when you first go under, in my experience and what I've really seen across the hundreds of people that I've done it with, is at first your ego brain, your survival brain is just like, what the fuck have you done? And I was with a best friend. We ran a record label together. We had lived together. We explored so much together. Instantly, I was like, he's planned this his whole life to kill me in this one moment. Like, everything has led to this one moment, and he's just going to pour fucking sand down my tube and kill me. And eventually 5 minutes later, that all faded away. But it's that moment that the ego and survival mind really wanting to get the fuck out and think everything's gone wrong, to that shift. It goes, oh, and now I'm in the deepest meditation I've ever been in. So that was just like groundbreaking to me. And like, I came out, and what my intention was some stuff around communication and my own communication skills and the people that I was dating. And like, I was dating a few people. I got back and I had messages from 3 of them with like the communication that I needed, that I just never had with them. The messages were there by the time I got home, and I was just like, okay, this shit is legit. And then all these things unraveled. So I just kept practicing it and practicing it. And again, this version of me that has to do things heroically. One time I done it and I went way too deep and just did all the wrong things. And as part of me that just needed to learn, okay, how deep can you go? How long can you go without a pipe? How can you do this? Blah, blah, blah. And I really fucking traumatized myself one time by doing it, where I froze up and I couldn't breathe, and I had to sort of be pulled out of that experience. And I just tried all the different ways of doing it. And then last year I was on, so this was like maybe 4 years ago that I started doing it. Last year, around this time, I was on tour with Atlas Talisman. He runs something called Open World Theater, which is like, I just highly recommend to anyone. It is like the school of non-acting. So it's how to really authentically drop into real life experiences that look like a piece of theater, but you're not acting, as just a very small brief. So we're on tour, but a second piece that we wanted to do that, because he's massive into rite of passage and social experiments, is he had the idea and I helped him bring it to life and nut out the ideas. We created something called Vicarious, where essentially we got rigged up with a camera attached to us facing out and then someone else on a camera with us. And we created it in Zoom, where like, and so there's some other people in there, and I had earphones in, or he had earphones in, and people played us. So there was people talking in my ears and they could see forward and I wouldn't take a move without them telling us. So we had open world in Sydney, Byron, and Melbourne, and we had to get everywhere, had to find our accommodation, how to travel, how to eat, what to wear, how to interact with the humans around us through the people within us. So it was like, you have to get us to this workshop by playing us. And then we had these like certain archetypal figures to unlock as a game. Then there was like the healer, the celebrant, the artists, this or that. And people were trying to unlock the celebrant within me. And the things you had to do was host something that a celebrant would. And because I had been doing this burial thing, I was like, the people I put up a status through the game to be like, who will let me bury them alive somewhere between Byron and Melbourne? And people, because if I had posted it online a couple of times doing it myself, people were always asking me to do it for them. But then I posted it up and it just got massive engagement. So I was like, oh, lots of people really fucking want to do this experience. So that's one side of why I started it. And the other is working in the music industry. I loved it. Especially loved creating music videos, right? Because I loved the like taking the music and then like visually capturing what this song is about and how it feels and representation of it. But I didn't like that we would market that to audiences, fans, and then they'd want to come see it live. And then it's just like someone up on the stage singing and you're in the crowd all together. It's like, there's a disconnect between these music videos, how are we marketing the artist versus how the live show is. So I wanted to figure out how to delete the stage and people experience. So that's why, as another part of the funeral, is like, I wanted it to be a real live music video. So this is why I have violinists and harp players and cellists there, because it's like, when I hear these instruments, if I were going to make a music video for them, this is what it would look like. And the people get to be a part of the music video. And I film these things as well, and I make videos out of it. But and I have different events that run like this, that are like rite of passage events that are also like a music video, where the actual artist isn't the main focus and isn't on the stage, but they are a part of the experience. They're actually weaving and creating, and they're feeding off the people there, but also they're facilitating the experience for the people. So this is where the merger came, was like, everyone sort of wants me to create this experience versus this is how I sort of been wanting to evolve from the music industry. So I just put them together. So the idea is, with the funeral, currently I do it as a 3-hour event, and I do a drop in that goes from like mental, physical, energetic to spiritual, of like getting people on board, and I teach them about rites of passage around ancestors and spirit and moving from A to B. And we set the intentions. Why do you want to bury yourself? What do you want to die to? How do you want to be rebirthed? But at the same time, what I really love is like, I make it somewhat theatrical. Like, I get in all this like pagan shamanic wear, and I do these big call-ins and movements, and I have all the tiki torches, and all my support people have to be in certain attire. The people that come have to be in certain attire. The music has to be a certain way. The place has to be a certain place, like the timing, everything. So it looks like how you imagine, like it's on TV, and that when you see on a documentary what a ritual looks like, I want to give that experience, but I want it to be authentic and real at the same time. Because that's a big part we talked about on the podcast. People that are into shamanism, people that are into plant medicine, facilitation, there's always this certain aesthetic, and we talked about your backdrop as a example, like with all these like geometric patterns and the black cockatoo feathers and all these different elements. It's like I love the aesthetics of ritual as well. So this has been my journey around it. So it took me years before I was okay, and I sort of fell into. I was never planning on creating this experience. And why I called it the funeral, again, looking at the taboo. Wow, I'm on a long rant on this one. So it's this taboo. It's the societal norm. It's like I am so fascinated by going to people's funerals, and I just, when I'm there, I'm sad and I'm grieving, but I'm like, this feels so inauthentic to me majority of the time. Like a lot of the time, it's never, people are never talking about the shit things people do. Like I went to this one a couple of years ago of someone that had a very like devastating life. Like they were very suicidal. They had really hard time in life, and only from my experience was I like, I'm happy for you. Like I'm happy that you chose to end your life, because it really felt like for you that you had no other way to go. Like you tried everything and it just wasn't working for you. And then everyone just focused on the positive things on this person's life and didn't really talk about the struggle that they had. And I was like, and that's what I wanted to bring into the funeral, is like, we are going to focus very much on why you want to die right now. So yeah, that's why I called it the funeral. It's like, let's have a funeral that you can attend yourself, and you can and create it the way that you want your own funeral to be. Because I feel like in society we have this very cut and paste version of what a funeral looks like, and I feel like a lot of people growing up is like, especially when you're in your teen years, I want my funeral to be a party. I feel like everyone fucking says that, but then everyone gets this epically depressing funeral when they do die, and I'm like, don't you remember they wanted a fucking party, you know? So I just, yeah, I wanted people to choose what their funeral would be.
Yeah, there's so many threads there that I wanted to comment on while you were speaking, and so much I would love to, speak
Welcome
to
to
and
cut me
unpack.
off at any time in the future, because that was a long-winded share.
No, that was great. Yeah, so firstly, I love that you are bridging this kind of intersection between, speaking about, it's like this next level or this deeper level of artistry enmeshed within communitas. It's not just looking to the one person, but it's the entire community involved in this ritualistic experience. And it's weaving these deeper levels of beauty, these aesthetics into everything as well. I really love that. And it speaks to this cross-hatching of the psychedelic experience in one way, in the sense of people are always talking about the importance of set and setting when it comes to having ritualistic experiences. And it no doubt has an effect on the way that we experience it, the way that our senses intermingle with everything within our environment. If you were just digging a hole in someone's backyard and plonking someone in there and covering them back up, it's not going to have as much as a profound effect as if you are setting it up as a very sacred ritualistic process with the sounds, with the smells, with the whatever it is. Yeah. So I really, really love that and honor that. And another thing that I wanted to ask you, there was a couple of things. So the first thing was, have you ever gone into a burial ritual just by yourself with no other sitter outside?
Yes and no. So I've done it at a public beach. Like I dug the hole, rah rah, and then just someone walking past. Excuse me, like, could you come over and just give me a hand for a moment? Because this is outside of just this. I try and do that a lot in life, where I go out and I bring my rituals and my ceremonies out into public and have people interact and immerse in it, because I like just the idea of So like someone comes over and they're like, what's going on here? Rah, rah. Oh no, I couldn't do that. No way. What if you die? Blah, blah, blah. And unpack it with them and they do it. And I'm like, once you're done, you can either sit or you can just continue and I'll know when to come out. And just that idea of like, this person just had a massive seed planted in their life. They get to go home, but like to their wife or to their friend and be like, there was this fucking guy at the beach today and he got me to bury him alive. No way, you know, like why? And then, oh, because he does it as his practice, blah, blah, blah. So like I couldn't, could I? Could I bury myself? Maybe I could. No, because I don't know how, unless
Yeah,
I
logistically
was,
it'd be quite
what,
difficult.
unless I just did it with my hands out, like I covered everything else.
Mm.
And then my hands are sticking out, which could be funny to do, I guess. But to get all the way under, I can't do it on my own.
Yeah, this is something that I have thought about for many years. I've known about the shamanic practice of burial when it comes to a particular initiation or a rite of passage into, you know. One of the things that I've noticed within your content is that these burial rituals have always been at the beach.
Yes.
And when you started posting them, and I think we had a conversation ages ago, but it didn't quite align at the time. But I had thought, is it possible to be able to go and have this experience by yourself? And it certainly brings up some dangers and risks when it comes to, the first thing I thought of was, yeah, no problems. I could bury myself somehow and have a snorkel sticking up in the air, but I would have a legitimate fear of someone coming along, a little kid, and putting sand down the snorkel, or the tides coming in if you weren't aware of them, obviously something to be mindful of, or, you know, someone just ripping the snorkel out, or setting up their beach chair on top of you, or a towel to have a lay down. So obviously there's all these considerations if you were to go and do it by yourself.
Yeah, so there's multiple reasons why I chose to do it at the beach. The most considerate one would be obviously here in Australia, when white people colonized, we created a lot of fucking damage to the indigenous people. We raped, we pillaged, we murdered, genocide, like, and there's blood on the ground and there's spirits in the ground that still hold a lot of trauma from the experience. And when I got 10 people buried at once, that's a big energetic container to hold. And though I do create a container of what's not allowed in and what is allowed in, still just for my own comfort, especially if I'm only doing it across 3 hours, is I don't want to be putting people into a circumstance where something can latch onto them that I don't want. And at least at the beach, the tide does come in and out and it cleanses the land. You know, it's always transient, the energy. So I just feel like on an energetic level, the ocean is cleansing more often than the earth in somewhere that is solid. And yeah, it might rain, but it's just sort of like drizzling down. It's not washing the dirt away and then putting new layers. So that's why I've done it there. And just two is like sand is lighter, easier to dig, more accessible to, well, not most people, but where I live, and a lot of people live where I am, is along the East Coast. So they're close to the beach to an extent. So that's sort of why I've chosen to do it there. And it's just really good to, like, as soon as you get out, run and jump in the ocean and sort of refresh yourself. So yeah, that's a big consideration I have with it. But I've done it in the earth as well. And it's something I would eventually like to move to, because so I've toured the funeral a few times and I've never done the funeral on the date that I first planned it because of the fucking weather. Like every single funeral I've done, it's rained on the day that I was originally meant to do it, so I've had to change the date. So I would like to be able to do it on a property somewhere where I can check out if it's okay to do it where it is, first of all. But yeah, like that I can possibly create some kind of shelter, some pergola, something that if it does rain, I can still host it, because I'm okay with a bit of instability, but this is like sometimes it takes a lot of effort to facilitate one of these, especially when you're traveling. Um,
Yeah,
so
totally.
I
You're
would
at the
like,
mercy of the elements when you're doing outdoor rituals.
yeah, and
Mm.
I would, yeah, if I'm going to do it on land, I would do it as a weekend retreat where I can sort of get people dropped into land. I can really create the container, and I can unpack with people if they need afterwards to sort of move through anything that possibly has attached to them. Yeah, because a 3-hour workshop to do on just in earth is not enough for me.
Yeah, totally. And I wanted to reiterate something that you touched on as well. It's the importance of gaining permission and asking permission from the land wherever we are conducting our ceremonial practices or rituals. And I think this is something that is often overlooked. And I get the sense that it is often conceptualized, but it's a different thing to have that conceptual understanding to that real, tangible, visceral feeling, that embodied feeling of the body within the body, and that bodily connection to land as well, rather than just being stuck up in the head. So yeah, super important. And what I wanted to piggyback off the top of that was you spoke to, it's almost like a teaching or an insight of holding these rituals down at the beach. It is the sand that is transient, as you speak to, comes and goes, as opposed to some of the more dense energies that might be held within other parts of the land. So it seems like that is, whether that's a teaching that came through while facilitating it, or it was something that you're aware of beforehand. You can speak to that in a moment if you like. But what I'm also interested to know is that, well, I'm interested to know what, if any, off the top of your head, key insights or teachings have come through from being a facilitator of this ritual, whether it's, some pertinent practicalities that come to mind, or whether it's more deeper philosophical or spiritual teachings when it comes to holding space for these people or working with the land in that way. So yeah, I'm curious to hear what you have to say.
So at first, because I had only done I had only buried myself on the beach for the 3 years where I just done it on my own and with some core friends that had asked me. And then I was like, when I'm going to do the funeral, I'm going to go to land. And the person that passed the practice on to me came out of nowhere with a massive hammer and just said, no fucking way. Like, you are not doing that. So they were the one that was like, if you're going to fucking do it, which I don't think you should, do it at the beach. And I was like, okay. And they broke down, so they gave me the teaching. Soon as they said it, I was like, yep, makes a lot of fucking sense, like, thank you so much. And yeah, they gave me, so this person is sort of been a shamanic mentor to me for many years. And yeah, so I with all mentors, I listen very acutely, but then I will also go, I'm gonna do the thing you told me not to do, because I have my right to exercise that. And that was a big thing, was like, when they said, I don't think you should do this, I was like, fuck, okay, maybe I won't. So I had to go out. I went out for like a few days out into the bush and did a vision quest, and had to figure out my permission to do it. Like, do I feel okay with doing this? And there was big processes around finding the places that I could do it as well. Like, there was a place I immediately knew where I wanted to do it in Sydney. And I went there. I was like, this is it. But again, the artist in me, like aesthetically, I didn't want to do it there. I was like, I don't like the aesthetics of this place. So I went fucking every beach in the Sydney coastline. Every place was like, nope, 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 nope. So I was like, all right, it's here. But as a big journey, and then also having to like, yeah, reach out to them and be like, I'm gonna do it. That was the first time with them that I had been like, I'm gonna do the thing you told me not to do. And they gave me like some really potent ingredients, like, okay, if you're gonna do it, here's what I give to you to really lean into it, you know? So that was a big journey itself to go, I'm gonna do this. Then next, a really potent part of it was learning to leaning into facilitating out loud. So when I do my own ceremonies, I talk to the spirits, I talk to the land, I talk to the plants, I talk to this, I talk to that. And it's on my own, which has always been like, okay, I can do that. But when I'm conducting, you know, sometimes up in at the funeral, there's up to 20 people. Only 10 people that go under, but there's up to 20 people there to go and talk to the spirits, call in my ancestors, talk to the land, talk to the water, talk to this, blah, 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 and really conduct that experience to others was a massive, massive part that I was initiated into, because there's, for me personally, there's still that part of like, is this all bullshit? You know, like, am I just burying people and going on this mythological rant about spirits and ancestors beforehand? I was like, fuck, you know? And I have this, like, when I'm setting the container, I call in a certain part of my ancestry line to hold the space with me. And I talk about like what is and isn't allowed in the container. So after the first, and a part of it is like only wise, because I allow people to call in their own ancestors, and I sort of give the steps to do that. But at the same time, I'm like, only wise, vital, loving, healthy, caring spirits are allowed in this container, even if someone else has called in an ancestor. If they have any dark, malicious, traumatized, low vibrations, they are not welcome into this container. And afterwards, because I have an unpack at the end, we sit around in circle and unpack our experiences. The first time I did it, like a few people told their experience of like actually seeing spirits walking around that were trying to get in but couldn't. There's another one that there had a bit of a sadistic calling into this experience that they were trying to move through, and they were actually calling dark spirits into their burial. And they said there was like a spirit trying to like strangle them, that they were actually calling in, and as much as they could call it in, it actually couldn't penetrate them. And all these different shares that came through around, like, and those other sides, like where someone was so wild, they went under, and I give a half an hour and an hour marker to people, and then at the hour I ask them to come out, and this person, I could see they were breathing, but they weren't responding to me. And I was just like, maybe they just want to stay under longer. And they had this like really magical experience with someone they were trying to let go of a brother of theirs that had passed away. They had this really potent experience with them. And that's why they couldn't hear me, because they were in this experience. So to me, that was a massive journey to go, this shit is legit as fuck. It's not just me on my own in the bush saying that I'm hanging out with spirits and nature and blah. It's like, no, there's like 20 people here that definitely agree with what just happened here. So that was massive for me to go, okay, like, I believe what I preach, to the extent, because I have the validation to know that I did this in front of others and they saw it, they believed it, they felt it. That was a massive initiation for me. The second part would be the maybe like, do I want to call it the shadow side of what I do? And that is like, I've been initiated into death and rebirth on a whole new level. Like, what spirits have connected to me, the sort of ego deaths that I have experienced, just the amount of death that I started to see around me, just tenfold, just started to skyrocket once I started calling in these experiences. And before each tour, in a beautiful but tragic way, I go through these massive peeling backs of who I am, which can either be ego death or real death has happened. And it's that real acute watching of like, what the fuck am I calling in these experiences? Because I am out here really transmitting to people that death is okay. You can move through it. Grief is okay. And there's ways that you can choose to die without physically dying. So that's a big part of my message, which means I'm going to be initiated into it. And also holding that for other people, like people going, bought my ticket. And then they're like, hey, this, and I have to, part of my like initiation process, the email, I'm like, hey, this stuff might start vortexing you in, and sort of having to hold space for people that I have not even met yet around death and rebirth. So that's been a fascinating one for me, as well as like, okay, you really want to talk about the taboo of death and the experiences of it? Here, you're in it right now, and so are all these people that you have called into this container. Definitely a lot of reverence and sitting with, and yeah, like irreverence as well, of like, fuck, I feel fucked and I don't know how to hold this, but I do, but I don't. This is fucked. I love it. This is what you've chosen, kind of moment.
And how do you navigate that when you do come across those states where you're like, I don't know how to hold this space. I don't know how to navigate this. What's your process?
So one experience would be when I was 17, one of my best friends passed away in a car crash, and there was the years where I was super connected to him, always in my dreams, always around. And then as I got a bit older, I lost connection with him. And then so fascinating that on my spiritual journey, not until I was like, I'm going to run the funeral, did I clock that's like, because I had lost full connection with him. Forgot what he smelt like, forgot what he looked like, forgot what his voice sounded like, forgot just a lot about him, right? I am 29 now, so I would have been 28 at the time. So it'd been 11 years since he had died. No, he was 18. I was 18 when he died. So 10 years. And then I was like, oh my God, like, I believe in spirit and connecting to spirits, but I've never tried to connect to him. Why have I never done that? And then just like a few days before I went to host the first funeral, I had this like exploding experience while I was driving of just like seeing him everywhere, like on the road, in the car. And by the time I got home, I was laying in bed with someone and I felt him drop into my body, where I wasn't me anymore, but I was him. And I just burst into tears, and I literally couldn't understand that experience. Like, it was something I'd never had before. I just like sat up and just cried and cried and cried. And I was just like, I don't know what to do here. I literally don't know what to do. And the person I was with had no fucking clue what to do either. This isn't something they were super familiar with. So I just sat. I just like literally sat. I did a bit of clearing on myself, but I was just like, you know what? Like, this is happening for a reason. I don't want it to stop. Like, I don't want to go get out of me. Like, I want this to stop. I was just like, just sit with it. And just, if you have to cry, if you have to freak out, if you have to want to get this out of you, you can feel it, but it doesn't mean it has to be over. So I just sat with it for like hours and hours. Like, it was, probably 1 a.m. is when he dropped in, and it probably wasn't till like 4:30 in the morning that it was over. And it felt like somewhat like insanity. Like, I was like, am I crazy? Am I making this up? Is this real? Can this happen to someone? Does he think this is fucking crazy? Like, what's happening? But I just had to surrender to that. And I think that was a big part of, like, also the like shamanic journey, and even what I'm promoting of like, hey, let me bury you alive. That shit's crazy to a lot of people. What the fuck is your problem? Why are you trying to bury people? Like, I just have to be okay with that. And I think having that experience where I feel like, and in my reality, that my dead friend from 10 years ago was literally inside of me and my identity was gone. That was, yeah, I think it was just an initiation of being like, it's okay to be crazy, you know, like, it's okay to just experience things that people don't experience. Yeah.
Man, that's amazing.
Mm.
Yeah, and to through my lens of perspective, I wouldn't call it crazy at all. And I'm sure you've come to that place where you know that it's not crazy. It's just that, you know, in many senses, we've been indoctrinated into society and culture and our belief systems and our way of living and breathing, and anything outside of that is seen to be crazy. But you know, we don't really have that cultural context or the cultural society's ability to hold these experiences. It's why so many people go through these transformational peak experiences with sacred medicines or rites of passage or initiations or whatever it is, and they come back into society and it's like, oh geez, what do I do now? It's like, yeah, you can drink the green juices and the smoothies and do the yoga and all the rest of it, take care of your physical vessel, but it's like, what are we actually integrating into? There's the integration of ourself, but there's the integration of the self into the other as well. So we, you know, that's just, it's not set up to be able to hold that and to, but I think we're pushing those boundaries now more as a collective. We're kind of peeking through the veil and seeing that all of these different states of consciousness and states of experiencing reality are actually available to us and are an inherent part of the human experience and experience in general. And, you know, with all of these shamanic experiences and you coming to terms with death on a deeper level, you're actually being initiated into on a very shamanic level. How are these experiences helping you to inform, or are they helping to inform how you're making sense of what we're going through as a collective and as individuals right now within this global debacle that we're in?
Yes. So with, for instance, this, going back to that experience in anything in life, these certain initiations, there's a big difference for me, like stepping away, even talking about, you know, in the spaces of calling in the ancestors and commanding spirits and whatnot. When I'm away from it and I think about it, it all is like, yeah, that's right. This is right. I believe this. I believe that. I believe this. But there's a massive, massive difference when experiencing it to go, oh, this is true. And that's why I say, like, if for instance, if you told me that story and I hadn't experienced it yet, I'd be like, yep, checks out to me. I believe you. You're not crazy. Great. But then when I'm in it, I'm like, I'm crazy. This is wrong. What have I done? I'm an idiot. Stop fucking doing this shit. It's not good for you. Load of bullshit. Just sends you crazy. Blah, blah, blah. So I think there's different degrees of believing something. And it's once it's embodied, actually embodied, that I can show up in life. and really be able to speak it from an experienced place. And I think with everything that's going on, like, it's such a fascinating, it's a hard question to answer, because, like, for instance, with the coronavirus, with everything that's going on, actually, this is how I answer it, is I believe a lot of people, for lack of a better term, that consider themselves woke, that have lived the woke lifestyle, that have been awakened, all that's going on in life right now. So 2020 with the fires, then coronavirus, and everything that's happening around the Black Lives Matter movement, it sent us back into a certain level of fear, and really making us question the lives that we live and lead, as well as giving us a massive opportunity to lean into all the practices and knowledge that we've curated previously. And unfortunately, a lot of people are falling into the fear, especially even people that are quite privileged, such as myself, to be a fair few degrees away from these situations. Like with the fires, I live in the city, so they don't super affect me. Coronavirus, I'm quite healthy, so I believe even if I got it, that I wouldn't have anything majorly bad happen to me. And with the Black Lives Matter, obviously, I'm a middle-aged white man, so as a first degree, I'm not going to experience anything too dramatic. But still, even within that, with everything going on, I have been in somewhat of a place of limbo, like not in the place of falling back into going back to sleep, but I've got a bit drowsy, if you know what I mean. Like I'm in the limbo, and it's really giving us an opportunity to go, no, I practice what I preach. So not falling into the fear mentality around corona and whatever's, I don't know what's going on in mainstream media, but I can imagine that there's a lot of fear mongering going on and the conversation around people. So it's coming back to these lived experiences of, for instance, in like the shamanic realms of like everything is given to us for a reason, and we are all one on a certain level, that I can trust that and be in that and continue to show up in a way that's going to serve others. And same with this Black Lives Matter, is like, especially people that are privileged, such as myself, is to actually go, I'm not going to disappear because I have white shame or because I am a part of the problem or whatever it is. I'm going to actually align myself and unpack myself in the way that will help me lead others to do the same and align myself with the people around, because I've had so many experiences where I can feel connected to everyone, but also get the perspective to see how different I am. Like, I can't have the perspective of like, there's one race during such a pivotal time right now and across all of time, but to really right now hone in and go, yeah, no, like this time is very evident how privileged I am, and the practices right now that I'm doing is gonna help. I can help others, but I have to also look at the ways of what I'm doing and how it also plays part in all that's going on. Is that
Mm,
I'm
mm,
finding it a bit harder to be completely clear, but that's sort of my answer.
mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, the reason I asked was because, what came to my mind through talking about all of these death rituals is that it's highlighting very evidently to those who are aware to this the disconnect that humanity has with death.
Mhm,
And within
mhm,
that disconnect to death is a disassociation to life. They go hand in
mhm,
hand.
mhm,
So,
mhm,
there is just so many people living unexamined lives. And I think the work that you're doing and the work that anyone's doing when it comes to facilitating rites of passage or rituals that involve the process of coming face to face with death in one way or another, and that
mhm.
rebirth is it's so needed. It's arguable that perhaps the practices that allow us to come face to face with death are maybe they're the most important practices that humanity needs. I don't know. That's just
Mhm,
a thought that's come off the
mhm.
top of my head. Maybe there's truth to that.
So, a lot of people ask me, how did you end up on your spiritual journey? How have you changed your life so dramatically from when I lived a bit more of a problematic, debaucherous kind of lifestyle? Debaucherous is like, and how did I connect to purpose so prominently? Is that I had a near death experience in my reality of it.
Hmm.
And for me, I was always like, I wish, for instance, like when I have friends that are like struggling to connect to purpose, when they think their life is quite purposeless, there's a part of me that's like, oh, I wish you could have a near death experience so you could see how much value you could get out of life if you actually chose to live it. And yeah, running these funerals has really given me the chance to actually do that, because there is a big focus with the funeral about the dying. Everyone, that's what everyone's sort of focused on, because everyone's scared of actually being buried alive and the concept of dying. But the most beautiful thing is like when you see this, like when people are buried and this first hand pop out and you can see them like the sensual nature, and they're like, oh my God, like air. Wow, like I've never felt air like this. And then when they come out and they can, either it's the sun is setting or it's nighttime, they see the stars and the ocean and they hear it, and you can see them like this whole new appreciation for life. And like a lot of the unpacks, people are like, I feel so much potential right now. Like, feel like before I was only getting like 20% of life, and maybe I'm up to like 75 now, that I understand that, wow, this air tastes so good. The wind on my skin just makes me feel so, like the sound of the ocean, how large the sky is. Like, so much is possible now. I'm like, oh, like, yes, because before you were alive, but now you're alive, and this is why I like to practice it often, because with anything, when you have these mind blowing experiences, this new potential, this new life, unfortunately, it does wear off if you don't have a practice. So I like to bury myself often, or I like to do whatever it is, like taking myself through a DMT experience, anything that sort of creates this death and rebirth moment. Yeah, that's just meditation, whatever it is like, I like to have some kind of death and rebirth process in my life so I can make sure life is shiny and full of potential. Uh, because, yeah, life can get dull if you're not letting go of things that no longer serve you anymore. So to gift someone life again, uh, yeah, not only is it a gift for them, but it's a gift for me when I see people rebirth and I see new wonder in their eyes and on their skin. I'm like, like I forget myself. It's like that time when I rebirth myself. Watching someone else rebirth is a rebirth for me, and I get to watch that, like 10 people pop out and be like, and I'm also staying in this like reverent facilitator shaman role, but inside I'm like, oh my God, did anybody else see that person just pop out of the ground? That was so beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, that way of being in service, being able to give someone a new vigor, a new sense, a new embodiment of what it means to be alive and to experience life. Yeah, that's certainly something very, very special. And on that topic as well, we've been going for an hour and a half, so I'll throw a couple of questions your way as we start to wrap things up.
Cool.
But since we're speaking about being alive, in contrast to the death ritual, what is it for you outside of everything that we've talked about that is most alive within your experience of life at the moment?
At this exact moment, I'm really, really, really exploring sexual fluidity. So I've identified as sexually fluid for a while, but it's still to an extent a philosophy that I believe in rather than a lifestyle I lead to the integrated version that feels right to me. And that also means that like I'm facing a lot of conditioning around it. So I'm really working on pushing boundaries around the quote unquote gay side of sexual fluidity. So I've been dating lots of men, and I'm doing it with my heart involved because previously I've had lots of sexual connections with men, and it's been led by like, I want to experience this. This is what I am into, but it hasn't been much heart and like soul intimacy involved. And part of what I'm unpacking right now is that I have a lot of artistic friends that on stage, behind the lens, different artistic boxes, they kiss men, they do these different sexually intimate experiences with men as a part of art. It's like, this is art and we're pushing boundaries. They'll put on certain queer looking clothes, whatever it is, as an artistic expression. And then, so I'm looking at that because I play part in that too. And then on the other side, all these spiritual containers that I'm involved with and all these spiritual leaders that I know, a lot of men in those areas, they're in temple spaces, in ritual spaces, they're having sexual connections with men, but they're saying that it's soul connections, which is true. Like, that it's not about the body that they're connecting with, it's the soul that they're connecting with. But both of these people aren't doing it in day-to-day life. So I'm trying to figure out why. This is making me feel very alive in the matter of like, why is it that artists are very queer and like soul connected men are very queer, but it's sort of like these are like progressive versions of being in the closet. And that's not fully true as well. Maybe this is just their true expression and it's not meant to be out in real life, but I'm trying to find the merger because in my experience of recently starting to date men, like it makes me feel very alive. If I'm on a date with a man, I'm holding hands or I'm kissing a guy in public, I'm like, ooh, this is new for me. If I take a guy down to meet my dad, I'm like, ooh, this is new for me. This is edgy. This is fun. How's my dad feel about this? I bet you this is really fucking him up on a conditioning level,
For sure.
Okay, we're going to unpack this at a later point. But I've also found that queer community, this is just my experience, doesn't mean it's the collective truth, but in my experience, one, gay men from the queer community that aren't from this like more spiritual art world that I'm involved with, they don't do as much personal development and have a lot more conditioning and trauma to move through. And they're also somewhat repelled by the personal development, spiritual world of people that like to take personal development quite seriously and like to express their masculine, feminine duality and feeling like both genders within them, compared to like queer people actually feeling these things. There's certain people that are like non-binary or do feel gender fluid within them rather than the ways that we talk about spiritually. So there's like a sort of a disconnect between the two worlds. And what makes me feel alive at the moment is figuring out the disconnect between the two and how they can be merged. So right now, as a social experiment, I'm not doing the best at it, but I'm trying to be all the way gay, meaning like I'm trying not to be with women. I was doing pretty well until last weekend, where because of being with women is comfortable and easy, and I know how to do it, and I love women. I want to continue to date women, but I just want to take a period where it's actually hard at times and uncomfortable, even though I feel very alive in the experience. But like approaching men, starting off, creating it, it's not easy for me because I'm not, the muscle isn't as strong there. So I'm trying to understand the queer community more and the queerness within me because it's something I want, but I find resistance because it's not what I'm comfortable in. So it's making me feel alive every time I find a new version of myself within it. That's what I'm super fascinated by at this current moment, is like bringing the all the way gay version of myself to the forefront. So I can actually, because of, if I want to consider myself sexually fluid, I'm really straight, in a manner of like, I like the idea of being sexually fluid, but in my experience and my comfortability, this side of the pendulum, which is straight, is the stronger side. So I'm trying to move the pendulum all the way over here. So then I can go, I have balance on both sides and come to the middle. And then I've got to go, I'm still have a bit of, I'm approving and love trans people, but there's still a transphobic part of myself that I don't like. But that's like probably where I have to go next, is like to start exploring. And I've been playing with transness within myself, within the ways that I dress, within the ways that I approach the world, and the ways that I can play with my different sexual orientations or like my sex organs. But that's like still something I've got to pursue within my sexual fluidity. So this is what is making me feel really alive right now.
Man, that's also fascinating. Classic
Yeah.
Paisley Heart, the shapeshifter, in many different ways.
Yeah, I try.
Look, well, when it comes to your offerings, what's your vision moving forward? Obviously, the collective scene has changed, and in-person rituals are on the back burner for the most part for a lot of people. So what do you want to speak to in regards to your offerings and directing people to your website or your socials and all that kind of stuff as we wrap up?
Who fucking knows? But I am, like, right now, I'm like really frustrated because I was just about to fucking start doing the funeral again. I'm doing another one. I just don't know. Like, I am doing the funeral. Let's just say the funeral's going to happen. I'm just going to have to socially distance it pretty wildly. I don't know. I literally don't really have much to offer right now because I don't know. I'm doing the spiral, which is an 8-week transformational process. You can check that on my website. The funeral is going to come back. I think sometime soon I'm going to put on a theater show. I'm just putting that out there. I'm going to put on an experiential ritual theater show soon. So just keep an eye out for that. But right now my offerings are, there's self-pleasure parties that are done online. The funeral is coming back, and I'm doing the spiral as well. Which
and
you
your
can
presence on social media is an offering in and of
it's just
itself
an
as
offering.
well.
Yeah, just follow me on social media. You'll see just the different shape-shifting tangents that I go on, and I have a podcast called Curious Conversations. And today, even though this will come out in the future, but today, Monday, the 10th of August, my episode with yourself just came out.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, I will have all the links in the show notes section so people can check it out. And lastly, Paisley, I want to ask you, I would love to invite you to share a few words just in honor of how we opened up the space, in light of honoring the sacred and what that means to you. I'd love to welcome you to share any closing remarks or words or prayers or anything that comes to mind when it comes to honoring the sacred and honoring our time and space together and that of the listeners tuning in.
Anyone that's tuning in, I would just invite you to any piece of information that came out from myself or Caillou around our experiences that felt like is something that you can't do, that only either of us can do because of the lives we lead. I invite you to make that a practice in some way in your life. So that could be that you could do a burial ritual, and doesn't mean you have to bury yourself alive, but you could maybe bury something off your altar that signifies something for you. You could download Tinder or Hinge and go to the opposite sex that you're not used to, either same sex or opposite sex, and make that a ritual itself, like to feel what it is within yourself. Anything that we've talked about, finding something sacred in yourself, exploring it. Actually take this audio experience and integrate it into your life on a way that's beyond intellectual but embodied. That's my invitation for anyone listening.
Aho to that. I love it.
Hmm.
Thanks again for joining me, brother. Much appreciated.
My absolute pleasure.